It's at the back door. The snowman my son built. Through the frosted glass, I can see the buttons on its chest, and it's smiling. There's a soft, rhythmic thumping getting louder now. A heavy, wet sound against the wood. I'm crouched in the hallway with my phone in one hand and a fireplace poker in the other. I don't know why I ever let Leo put that old hat on it. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it. This all started a week ago, after we moved in, the day of the first snow. It was supposed to be a happy day. 2 months ago, I finally did it. After years of saving every penny, working double shifts until my feet went numb, I bought a house for me and my 7-year-old son, Leo. It wasn't much, a small 2-story foreclosure on the edge of a quiet rural town. The paint was peeling and the floors creaked, but it was ours. It was an escape from our cramped city apartment with its thin walls, noisy neighbours, and the constant reminder of a life I was desperate to leave behind. For me, it was a fortress. For Leo, it was a kingdom. He was ecstatic. He'd never had a real yard before. That first week, he spent every afternoon just running in circles on the overgrown grass, his laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. I watched him from the kitchen window, feeling this heavy weight I'd been carrying for years finally loosen. We were safe here. We were starting over. The past was a ghost I'd finally outrun. The house was old, built in the 50s, according to the realtor. Full of character, she said, which is polite for drafts, quirks, and weird noises at night. But it had charm too. A big stone fireplace, a sunny breakfast nook, and a huge oak tree out back that practically begged for a tire swing. Our evenings were spent eating takeaway on the living room floor and unpacking box after box. We made lists of things we wanted to do once we were settled. Plant a garden, get a dog, build a treehouse. For the first time in a long time, life felt full of promise. One afternoon, I was unpacking a box labelled miscellaneous junk and found something I didn't expect. An old photo album, clearly left behind by the previous owners. I should have tossed it, but curiosity won. The pictures were faded. A smiling family from the 70s. A man, a woman, and a little boy around Leo's age. Birthdays, picnics, Christmas by the fireplace. But toward the end, the photos changed. The smile slipped away. The woman looked drawn and tired. The man's eyes seemed hollow. The last photo was just of the house. No people. Taken from the street under a grey sky, the place looked abandoned, wrong. It made me shiver. I shut the album quickly and shoved it into the back of a closet. Later, I found more evidence they'd left in a hurry. Open half-packed boxes in the attic, belongings still mid-sort. Whatever happened, they didn't leave neatly. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted it to, but I told myself I was being silly. We were happy. That was all that mattered. A week after we moved in, we woke to a world transformed. A perfect thick blanket of snow covered everything. The first real snow of the year. Leo had his face pressed to the window, breath fogging the glass, eyes shining. Can we build a snowman, please? A big one. How could I say no? We bundled up and stepped outside. The air was sharp and still, and the only sound was the crunch of our boots. We rolled huge snowballs across the yard, laughing as we tried to lift them onto each other. Charcoal for the eyes, a crooked carrot for the nose, and Leo drew a wide, happy smile with his mitten. We found 2 gnarled branches for arms. He needs a hat, Leo said, and a scarf. The scarf was easy. I had an old red one. but a hat. Everything was still in boxes. The disappointment in his little face. I couldn't stand it. Then I remembered the attic. That dusty, shadow-filled space, full of abandoned belongings. I'd seen an old steamer trunk up there. "Hang on," I told him. "I might have something." I climbed into the cold attic. It smelled of old wood and forgotten time. Inside the trunk, buried under brittle newspapers and moth-eaten blankets, was a hat, an old-fashioned black bowler. It felt heavy in my hands, weirdly cold, unnaturally cold. A prickling unease crawled up my spine. I almost put it back, but Leo was waiting, excited. I shook off the feeling. It was just a hat. When I brought it down, Leo beamed. He placed it proudly on the snowman's head. The moment it settled, a sudden gust of wind spun snow all around us. Probably coincidence, but it felt like something shifting. Leo named him Mr. Buttons. Later, looking at the photo I took, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The smile looked different. Not cheerful. Smug. That night, after I tucked Leo in, he whispered, "Good night, Mr. Buttons," toward the window. I smiled and went downstairs to unpack. Before bed, I checked the yard one last time. Under the moon, Mr. Buttons stood exactly where we left him. I woke up hours later, heart pounding. No noise, no cause. Just that primal feeling that something was wrong. I went to the window, half asleep, and looked out. My blood turned to ice. Mr. Buttons wasn't in the middle of the yard anymore. He was 10 feet closer to the house. I stared, refusing to believe what I was seeing. Snowmen don't move. It had to be shadows, exhaustion, anything but what it looked like. I forced myself back to bed. I didn't sleep. In the morning, he was still there, in the closer spot. Not melted, not toppled, just there. And the snow around him wasn't smooth. It looked dragged. "Mom, look," Leo called. "Mr. Buttons came to say hi." I forced a smile. "Yeah, wow." Inside, dread pooled in my gut. No footprints, no signs of anyone tampering. Just that wide trench in the snow leading from where he'd been to where he now stood. Leo went to bed excited, convinced Mr. Buttons would move again. I prayed he wouldn't. That night, I stayed awake in the living room with coffee, watching the backyard through the window. Hours passed. Nothing moved. I must have drifted off because a soft tapping on glass jolted me awake. Tap, tap, tap. From the kitchen. I grabbed the heavy glass frog from the table and crept toward the sound. My pulse thundered in my ears. I peeked around the corner. Nothing. But the tapping had been real. I stepped to the window over the sink and looked out, my breath caught in my throat. Mr. Buttons was standing directly beneath the window, looking up. A twig arm raised, the jagged branch almost touching the glass. He had crossed the entire yard. I gasped and stumbled back, dropping the frog. It shattered loudly, but I barely heard it over the ringing in my ears. That face, that smile, was wrong. So wrong. Twisted by shadows into something malicious. I ran upstairs shaking and slept on Leo's floor. The next day, I refused to let him outside. He threw a tantrum, begging to play with Mr. Buttons. I lied about a storm coming. I called the police, tried to be calm. Said someone was trespassing. moving things in my yard to scare me. What kind of things? The dispatcher asked. A snowman. Silence. A snowman, ma'am? Yes, I insisted. It moved to my window last night. Ma'am, have you been drinking? They sent an officer hours later. He walked the property, saw the trench marks, the snowman's position, and still wrote it off as kids playing a prank. No one believed me. Tonight, the storm I lied about actually hit. A full blizzard. I knew it would come for us tonight. I felt it. All day, Mr. Buttons stood motionless in the yard, but the air felt heavy, charged. I brought Leo into my room, pretended it was a fun sleepover, and barricaded the front door. Towels stuffed into every window frame, fireplace poker in hand, waiting. The wind howled, shaking the house. Then came a new sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Something heavy dragging itself across the back deck. Then, thump. Against the back door. I crept down the hallway. Through the frosted glass, I saw its round head. Its charcoal eyes staring in. Its smile stretched wide. Thump, thump, thump. The door shuddered. I ran to Leo, shoved him gently into the closet with his teddy, whispering that it was a game. The quiet game. I dialed 911 again, screaming for help. Begging. The banging stopped. Silence. Thick. Wrong. Then, scratch. 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 At the living room window, I turned slowly, a twig arm, scraping lines into the frost. A single charcoal eye peering through a melted patch. Not at me, at the hallway, at the closet where my son hid. Sirens cut through the storm. Blue and red lights washed over the yard. The scratching stopped. When officers forced the door open, they found me on the floor, hysterical. They swept the house, their faces stiff with confusion and doubt. They found Leo, scared but unharmed. Outside, they saw Mr. Buttons at the window. They saw the drag marks, the scratches. They still called it a prank. In the morning, a warm front hit. Slowly, Mr. Buttons began to sag and melt. His stick arms fell off. His features sank into slush. Soon, only a dirty mound remained. And sitting on top, the black bowler hat. Cold. Heavy. Waiting. I tried to move on. Tried to convince myself it was over. That whatever had happened died with the snow. A week later, while cleaning Leo's room, I reached into his toy box and felt something cold. Bone-deep cold. The hat. Dry. Stiff. As cold as the night it came alive. Hi everyone. Thanks for listening to the first of tonight's 2 stories. This one was written by Gutter Press Tales. You can find more of their work exclusively on this channel. Now, on to the next one. You know, when you tell people you work the overnight shift at a local radio station, they always picture one of 2 things. It's either super spooky or unbelievably boring. For the last 5 years at WKRV, The Raven, it's been the second one. My entire world is a dim soundproof booth lit only by the hum of monitors and the soft glow of the mixing board. My job is simple. Keep the music going, run the ads, make sure we don't fall off air before sunrise. Quiet, predictable, mindless, at least. It used to be. Because last week, a little after midnight on November 1st, the music suddenly stopped. Not faded, Not glitched, stopped. Dead air. The one sound an overnight DJ is never supposed to hear. And in that silence, a voice whispered through the monitor speaker. "Where is my song?" I froze. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant. But that moment was the first crack in something old, something fragile, something I had just broken without knowing. Because the real reason radio stations switched to Christmas music in November has nothing to do with corporate greed or holiday cheer. It's a ritual, and this year the most important song was missing. Normally the holiday switch is entirely automated. The master computer, older than I am, handles everything. At exactly 12 a.m. on November 1st, it replaces the classic rock lineup with the usual parade of jingles, crooners, and Mariah Carey shrieks. I don't touch anything. But this year, when I sat down at the console, the automation system was frozen. The screen was locked on an error message. A red warning light blinked on the server tower like it was having a heart attack. The entire setup had crashed. I restarted everything, but the holiday playlist didn't load. Nothing did. The computer simply refused to switch to the winter schedule. For the first time in my 5 years here, I had to run November manually, except I didn't know how. November was always handled by the automation system. I had never seen the back-end playlist, never needed to, and the station manager sure as hell didn't leave any instructions. So, with the station sitting in dead air and panic starting to rise in my chest, I went looking for answers. I headed straight to the storage room in the back, the one everyone calls the crypt. It's basically a graveyard for obsolete tech. Dusty boxes, coiled wires, reel-to-reel tapes, and binders full of procedures no one's followed since the early 90s. I dug through 3 metal cabinets before I found it. A thick, ring-bound operations manual, yellowed and water-stained, printed sometime in the late 80s. A forgotten piece of the station's history. Inside it was a section titled Solstice Preservation Protocol. I frowned. It wasn't like our usual scheduling notes. It wasn't even written in modern formatting. It was closer to a ritual instruction than a playlist. Mandatory sequence, no substitutions. Must run in full order nightly, November 1st to December 25th. And there, 4th from the top, the listener's hymn. I'd never heard of it. The manual even listed a file number. So I searched the digital archive. The file existed, but when I clicked it, file not found or corrupted. I shrugged, grabbed Wonderful Christmas Time, and dragged it into the empty slot. And with that tiny, stupid, casual action, I undid decades of protection. The first few hours felt normal. Then the static started. Not the usual hiss of old equipment. This static had texture, movement, pattern. It hissed and whispered at the edges of songs, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Then the private phone line, the one only engineers use, rang 4 times in 1 hour. Every time I answered, nothing. Not a click. Not a breath. Just a silence so heavy it felt like someone standing on the other end, listening. By the 4th night, the static had become almost lyrical, weaving underneath the music. During a soft fade of "I'll be home for Christmas," I heard it clearly. A deep, guttural voice whisper, "Hungry." My skin crawled. I dug deeper into the archives. Playlist logs from the last 20 years all showed the same pattern. The Solstice Preservation Protocol, every single November night, and always 4th in the lineup. The listener's hymn, until now. I went back into the crypt, There had to be more. I searched behind the old amplifier shelves, behind boxes of CDs from 1994, until something caught my eye. A small, leather-bound logbook. The station manager's personal diary from 1958. The November entries weren't logs. They were warnings. The manager, Arthur Finch, wrote about something he called the annual appeasement. A ritual broadcast designed to keep something at bay. Something he called the listener. A being of silence and sound. An ancient consciousness that awakens with winter darkness. Not malicious, just ravenous. The holiday songs weren't for us. They were a barrier, a sonic fence, a wall of frequencies built to lull the listener back into dormancy. Arthur explained every song's purpose. Melodies designed to mimic warmth, harmonies meant to confuse or distract, low frequencies that mimic distance. And the keystone, the lock on the whole cage, was the listener's hymn, a melody engineered to mimic deep hibernation frequencies. Without it, the wall collapses. The listener hears us. And it comes. I sprinted to the vinyl archive. There, in a plain brown sleeve, was the record version of the listener's hymn. I exhaled in relief, until I pulled it out. It wasn't cracked, it wasn't warped. It had been shattered, perfectly, deliberately, into a dozen sharp pieces. Arthur's final note hit me like ice water. The listener cannot break the hymn. It can only weaken the lock. A human hand must destroy it. Someone at the station had done exactly that, which meant someone knew, or someone wanted it free. When I returned to the booth, the whispers were no longer in the static. They were under the songs themselves. The temperature dropped so fast, frost crawled across the inside of the soundproof window. The lights flickered, then died one by one until only my monitor glowed. The private line rang again. This time, when I answered, something breathed. Wet, ragged, click, click, click. Like someone learning how to shape words. I called my manager. He brushed me off, said I was stressed. A low, shaking growl rose from the corners of the booth. The walls pressed inward, the air thickened. Then the main broadcast monitor flatlined. Dead air. And in that smothering silence, a voice whispered, "I can hear you." I grabbed Arthur's logbook. A yellowed sheet of paper fluttered out. Music notation written by hand. The listener's hymn. His shaky handwriting at the bottom read, "It does not need to be perfect, only complete. The shape of the melody lulls it. I don't read music, but I could recognize the rise and fall, the rhythm, the shape. There was no time. I switched my mic to live, leaned in, closed my eyes, and hummed, weakly, off-key, barely a melody. My voice shook. Tears blurred everything. Something cold brushed the back of my neck, like a hand made of empty air. But I kept humming, and humming, and humming, until the wall clock blinked 6:48 a.m. Sunrise. The pressure vanished. The growling stopped. The temperature eased, and the emergency backup track kicked in. A painfully cheerful car dealership jingle. It was over. For now, I walked out into the morning sun and didn't look back. I left the keys on the mixing board next to Arthur's logbook. My humming didn't fix anything. It only bought time. The ritual is broken. The automation is dead. The record is destroyed. The listener has heard our world now, and it knows the way in. So next time you're out shopping in early November and you hear Christmas music playing way too early, don't roll your eyes. Listen. Listen for static under the melody. Listen for silence between the notes. They're not trying to get you in the holiday spirit. They're trying to repair the wall. But without the hymn, the listener is awake. And it is very, very patient. Hi everyone. Thanks for listening to tonight's double feature courtesy of Gutter Press Tales. You can find more of their work scattered among playlists exclusively on my channel. A massive shout out to my members. Or rather, member Mark Mathern 7322. If you enjoyed the chaos, hit subscribe, like, and maybe join the membership so you can say, I was here before she got weirdly famous. If you really, really enjoyed it, think I have that super thanks button down there somewhere. Even £1 helps me toward my goal of making this a full-time thing. Then I can just have one full-time thing instead of my day job and this full-time. I'm here a lot. Good night.